The slow, deliberate crackle of a soda can opening, the fizzing of bubbles, a soft, rhythmic tapping on glass, a gentle whisper, "Are you paying attention?" Have you noticed that commercials are getting quieter? For decades, the golden rule of advertising was to shout louder than the competition, blaring music, fast-talking announcers, explosions. But recently, some of the biggest brands in the world, from IKEA to Coca-Cola to KFC, have completely flipped the script. They aren't shouting anymore. They are whispering. Before we dive in, here's a quick roadmap of where we're headed today. We'll start with the basics, what ASMR actually is, and why it's no longer just a niche corner of the internet. It's gone fully mainstream, and brands have taken notice. From there, we go under the hood, into the neuroscience. We'll look at what's actually happening in your brain and nervous system when you hear these sounds, because the biology is what makes this marketing strategy so unusually powerful. Then, we get into the real-world proof. We'll walk through brand case studies, IKEA, Michelob Ultra, KFC, and look at the actual sales and engagement numbers that came out of their ASMR campaigns. And finally, we'll cover the side of this trend that most marketers ignore, the risk. Because the same sounds that relax some people send others into a genuine fight-or-flight response. Understanding that divide is what separates a smart ASMR strategy from a PR disaster. Let's get into it. ASMR was the #1 most searched term on YouTube in 2024. The content market is already worth $1.8 billion and projected to hit $6.2 billion by 2034. Search volume has tripled since 2015. So what exactly is ASMR? It stands for Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response, a deeply relaxing, almost euphoric physical sensation triggered by specific sounds: whispering, tapping, crinkling, the fizz of a soda can. For roughly 20 to 40% of the population, these sounds don't just sound pleasant. They produce a real physical tingle that starts at the crown of the head and melts down the spine. What started as a niche corner of YouTube in 2009 has become a billion-dollar content category, and brands have taken notice. But here's where it gets really interesting. ASMR doesn't just sound good. It physically rewires your emotional state. When you hear these sounds, your brain's reward system activates, releasing dopamine, the same feel-good chemical triggered by music, food, and social connection. It also stimulates oxytocin, the bonding hormone associated with trust and comfort. And critically, it switches your body from the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, into the parasympathetic state, rest and digest. Heart rate slows, cortisol drops, you feel safe. Now think about that from a marketer's perspective. Instead of shouting at you until you pay attention, they are chemically inducing a state of calm and trust, and then placing their product right in the middle of it. When you hear a crisp close-up sound like tapping or whispering, your brain doesn't just process it as noise. Functional MRI studies have shown that ASMR triggers significant activity in specific regions of the brain. First, it activates the brain's reward system, specifically the nucleus accumbens, triggering a release of dopamine, the feel-good neurotransmitter. It also stimulates the release of oxytocin, the hormone associated with social bonding, comfort, and caregiving. This is why ASMR videos often feel incredibly intimate and safe. But the real magic happens in your nervous system. Traditional, loud advertising triggers your sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response. It raises your heart rate and demands your attention through stress. ASMR does the exact opposite. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest state. Studies have shown that watching ASMR content actually lowers heart rates and reduces cortisol levels. Think about that from a marketer's perspective. Instead of annoying you into paying attention, they are chemically inducing a state of deep relaxation and bonding, and then associating that euphoric feeling directly with their product. In 2017, IKEA released a 25-minute-long commercial called Oddly IKEA. There was no shouting about low prices, just a faceless woman whispering about thread counts while gently scratching bedsheets and tapping on dorm room furniture. A 25-minute ad sounds like a marketer's nightmare in the age of the 5-second attention span, but it worked. The video went viral, and IKEA reported a 4.5% increase in in-store sales and a 5.1% increase in online sales during the campaign. They are using ASMR, autonomous sensory meridian response. It's that tingly, static-like sensation that starts at the crown of your head and melts down your spine when you hear certain sounds. What started as a niche internet subculture has exploded into a multi-billion-dollar creator economy, and now it is the ultimate weapon in modern marketing. But this isn't just a quirky creative choice, it is a calculated neuroscientific strategy. Today, we're going to look at why audio-first ads are taking over, how they literally hack your nervous system, and why the sound of a whispering celebrity might be the most effective sales pitch of the decade. To understand why brands are obsessed with ASMR, we first have to understand what it does to your brain. ASMR stands for Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response. For the people who experience it, estimated to be around 20 to 40% of the population, it is a deeply relaxing, euphoric physical sensation triggered by specific auditory or visual stimuli. Then came the ultimate test, the Super Bowl. In 2019, Michelob Ultra bought the most expensive ad space on television and filled it with whispering. Actress Zoe Kravitz sat between two microphones whispering about the beer's organic ingredients, tapping her fingernails on the glass bottle and pouring the fizzy liquid. In a broadcast defined by sensory overload, the quietest ad became the most memorable. Even fast food got in on it. KFC launched KF Chill, a campaign featuring the soothing, crackling sounds of chicken frying and bacon sizzling. Coca-Cola built entire campaigns around the auditory anticipation of a popping tab and fizzing bubbles. These brands realize something crucial about the modern attention economy. We are constantly bombarded by screens, notifications, and noise. Our attention spans are fractured. But audio, specifically intimate, high-fidelity audio, forces you to lean in. It demands a different kind of focus. In a digital ecosystem where average video retention rates are plummeting, ASMR-style content has been shown to significantly increase watch time and viewer retention. You don't skip the ad because the ad feels like a massage for your brain. But there is a catch, a pretty big one. Hacking the nervous system is a double-edged sword. While 20 to 40% of people might experience euphoric tingles from ASMR, another segment of the population experiences the exact opposite. It's a condition called misophonia, which literally translates to hatred of sound. For people with misophonia, the exact same sounds that trigger relaxation in ASMR fans, whispering, lip smacking, tapping, chewing, trigger an immediate involuntary rage or severe anxiety. Their brains have heightened connectivity between the auditory cortex and the emotional control centers. When they hear a whisper or a crunch, their sympathetic nervous system goes into overdrive. Their heart rate spikes, they start sweating, and they feel an overwhelming urge to escape. This is the massive risk brands take when they use ASMR. A study published in the Journal of Retailing and Consumer Services found that while ASMR ads generate highly positive reactions from those who enjoy the sensation, they generate intensely negative reactions from the general population, and especially from those with misophonia. If you are a marketer, you are playing Russian roulette with your audience's nervous system. You might create a deeply loyal, emotionally bonded customer, or you might trigger a literal fight-or-flight panic response that makes them hate your brand forever. So where does this leave the future of advertising? We are moving into an audio-first world. With the dominance of AirPods, podcasts, and spatial audio, brands have unprecedented direct access to our ear canals. They are no longer just competing for what we see. They are competing for how we feel. Mr. Marketing proves that the most effective way to capture attention isn't to shout the loudest, it's to speak the softest. By leveraging neuroscience, dopamine, and the parasympathetic nervous system, brands have found a way to bypass our critical thinking and tap directly into our physical sensations. Here are some key takeaways. 1. ASMR physically rewires the viewer's emotional state. ASMR doesn't just sound pleasant. It triggers a measurable neurochemical response. It activates the brain's reward system, dopamine release, stimulates oxytocin, the bonding hormone, and switches the body from the sympathetic fight or flight state into the parasympathetic rest and digest state. Brands using ASMR aren't just making a stylistic choice. They are engineering a specific physiological condition in the viewer before presenting their product. 2. Silence outperforms noise in the attention economy. The brands that leaned into ASMR, IKEA, 25-minute ad, 5.1% online sales lift, Michelob Ultra, the quietest Super Bowl ad ever, and KF's Kill proved that whispering cuts through digital noise more effectively than shouting. In a world of fractured attention spans, audio-first content that demands you lean in generates longer watch times, higher retention, and stronger emotional brand association than conventional loud advertising. 3. It's a double-edged neurological weapon. The same sounds that induce euphoria in ASMR-sensitive viewers trigger intense rage or anxiety in people with misophonia, estimated to affect around 20% of the population. Research shows that ASMR ads produce strongly negative reactions in the general population, meaning brands that use this technique without audience segmentation risk alienating far more customers than they attract. The tactic is powerful precisely because it bypasses rational thinking, but that cuts both ways. The next time you see a commercial, close your eyes and just listen. Pay attention to the sounds, the crunch, the fizz, the whisper, because they aren't just trying to sell you a product, they are trying to hack your brain. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the psychology of marketing, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and let us know in the comments. Do you get the ASMR tingles or do these ads drive you crazy?